So it's been a couple minutes and I've had a second to process everything. So I'm like less stunned. I totally thought that this was going to be negative this morning and it was going to take a few more days to get a positive if I was at all. I wasn't convinced that it was going to work this time. I was really worried that it wasn't. Where'd that go? Oh God. It's not even like faint or like a squinter like some people call them. And I'm only 5 days post-transfer. So relieved. Oh my God. I don't know if you can see it better, but maybe there. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank God. This whole journey has been so emotionally draining and physically draining to an extent. It's been nonstop since I think like February because I think it was February or like maybe late January that I first reached out to my fertility clinic to begin more rounds of IVF, and maybe it was January. And yeah, you know what? It must have been January because what happened was I reached out to them and then it seemed like almost immediately. Oh, and the way it works. So I live in a province which gives people one, they call it funded, but it's really just partially funded round of IVF. It doesn't cover drugs, and there's a couple other things that some people want to add on to the procedure that costs money that the government doesn't cover. And anyway, so I like reached out to like get on this list thinking that, because it's a wait list, thinking that because I was already 40 and I'd heard that the wait list was typically a year to, I think, a year and a half long, if I remember correctly. And it varies by clinic. That I probably wasn't going to get a funded cycle before I needed to do IVF because time was ticking. And so I was really surprised when I got an email back. It almost seemed like overnight, but when I went back and looked at the emails, it turns out it was 5 weeks later, giving me an offer of a March start for my IVF cycle. And that was wildly unexpected. But I was worried that if I turned it down because I wasn't ready. And so the way these funded cycles work is that you do the funded cycle, and then I was under the mistaken belief that then you had to take the embryo and implant it like within 3 months of doing the retrieval. And luckily I found out that it's not clear cut like that. Like if you have other medical things going on, for instance, additional rounds of IVF, or other surgeries related to their fertility stuff. Like I had a septum removed from my uterus. These can push the timeline beyond the 3 months. So I didn't realize that initially. So when they first gave me the offer, I was freaking out because I'm like, oh God, this is like the chance of a lifetime. Like, how am I so lucky that I just got on the wait list a few weeks ago and they're already offering me a spot to start in a few weeks from now? And I felt a lot of pressure not to turn it down. And so I was doing these like cost benefit analyses and thinking like, well, initially I thought, okay, so if I accept and then I change my mind at some point, the worst thing that's going to happen is just that I'm going to have to end up paying out of pocket for that cycle, which I was like, okay, like it buys me time. But then I fortuitously found out that if I did a couple more cycles, then we could push it. Originally, we were intending to do the first FET in and around August. And then it just got this whole ball rolling with, oh my gosh, I'm going to have my first IVF round in a matter of weeks. Because I think at this point it was already February. And then I needed to find sperm. And if you've ever shopped for sperm before, it's not easy. If you care at all what your donor or what half your child's genetics are going to be, it's definitely a process, like finding the right donor for you. Even from a medical perspective, like you ideally want to do genetic testing on yourself, which I had previously done. And then you want to cross-reference what you're a carrier for with what the donor's a carrier for, because you don't want to have a baby that has some sort of debilitating disease or something like that, if you can avoid it. And that was like stressful because I think I had 2 weeks to find a donor. And so I was just like going through the inventories of so what happens here is most people, I think, tend to buy sperm from American sperm banks because so in Canada you can't charge money for like genetic material. So any donors in Canada can't charge money for it. So I'm not very familiar with the donor agencies here, but from what I recall, the donors here like just simply do it out of the goodness of their heart, and as such, you don't end up getting a lot of information about the donor, which isn't ideal. And so as a result, a lot of Canadians buy their sperm from American banks like Fairfax, California Cryo, SciTech, places like that. And then we have distributors in Canada who distribute those products. And so I was told by one of the Canadian, distributors that I was working with to just look through their inventory rather than looking on the American banks' websites, because I was on a limited time limit, and at least then I would be looking at sperm. I was about to say inventory of products that can be shipped tomorrow, essentially, since I was on a timeline. And like that was a whole process of looking through all of the profiles for the donors who were readily available, and then figuring out, like, whittling it down. So I think I looked at, probably close to 100. It was definitely over 50 donors. And when you would find one that piqued your interest, I would like make a note of it. And I mean, I went into a lot more detail than that. Like, I made a lot of notes. When I found someone, I made a lot of notes on that profile to remind myself what I liked about them. And then from there, I just looked at my short list of donors that I liked. And luckily, I was able to select one pretty quickly that stood out to me. So it was a lot easier than 3 years ago when I did my first cycle, because then we were still kind of in COVID and there were actually shortages in sperm donors as well. So yeah, this whole process essentially, I guess, kicked off, I think in January. I was getting on daycare lists because there's like subsidized daycare here if you're lucky enough to get a spot, basically. And I've heard horror stories about people being on lists and 3 years later they still haven't gotten a spot, and I'm just not in a position to gamble with that. So I quickly found out that you can get on the list without even being pregnant. So I started that in January after I got on the wait list for the funded cycle and had gotten the ball rolling with my original doctor. And then, yeah, February was just looking for sperm donors. And then, yeah, March, I guess, was when we started. It was, I think, towards the end of March that we started my first IVF cycle. And it's pretty much been go, go, go since then. It was back to back to back to back cycles. I did 4, God, yeah. I did 4 rounds of IVF back to back. And then we took a break to test the embryos that we had. And then it turned out that ideally we would get 1 or 2 more. So while we had paused to test them, there like a month went by, had a break. And then we did another cycle. And then the next month we did the surgical removal of the septum in my uterus. And then I think we waited a month or so before we started the FETs. Anyway, it's been like go, go, go pretty much, I guess, since February. Because I got on, I think, 12 daycare wait lists. So that took like a couple weeks to do. And then the sperm, and yeah, it's all worth it. It is all worth it. Wow. It's not even faint, the line. Such a good sign. Because these tests, I bought them. I did a bunch of research before I bought pregnancy tests last time. And a lot of pregnancy tests have a sensitivity of 25, and some cases even 50, I think I read. But these first response ones are very sensitive. I think they have a sensitivity of, if I recall correctly, 6.3 units of HCG, which is far lower than the average, which is 25. Oh my God. It's so crazy, like everything I've done to get here. And I've been working on this for a long time. I thought, so I'm 41 now. And even in my late 20s, I thought, if I didn't meet Mr. Wonderful, I would have kids on my own, assuming that I was like financially stable enough on my own to do it. And a little over 10 years ago, I went through some serious health problems. I was in a really horrific car accident that changed my life. And my recovery did not go well. I still have issues. 11 years later. And I kind of knew then that in all probability this would end up being my path, because the car accident happened 41 now. So I would have been 30 or turning 30, I forgot. But the reality is that a lot of people settle down in their late 20s and early 30s. They get married. And if you look at the statistics, and my experience has like kind of found this as well, that a lot of like the good men who are wanting families firstly and are like good, kind people with a good head on their shoulders and all the kind of things that many of us look for, they get snapped up in around age 30. And then if they're the type that want kids, they start families, and 50% of marriages end in divorce, which also means that 50% stay married. But often when people have kids, even if they end up getting divorced later, they're probably not going to get divorced in their 30s when they have a young family. Anyway. And then the men who don't marry, the older they get, the less likely it is for them to get married. So I think like if a man's never been married by age, it's like 37 or something like that, there's only a 15% chance that they'll ever get married. So yeah, even about 10 years ago, I hoped this wouldn't happen in the way it's happened. Like of course I would love to have a partner, but I was worried that I would miss the boat on the good men, because I had a lot of health problems. Like I was not well for a long time. And then more recently I started worrying that because of how long it was taking me to heal, that I was going to miss the boat on having kids altogether. And then COVID happened. Yeah. So this is a real relief. And I'm pregnant. Wow. And so I might get the numbers wrong a little bit, but like once you get pregnant with a euploid embryo, I think the chances of miscarriage, like obviously the next like couple weeks will be really telling. But I think in total, once you're pregnant with a euploid embryo, I think there's only like a 10, 12, max 15% chance of miscarriage. So fingers crossed. Yay. Yay, 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 yay. I can't stop looking at it. It's like, it's kind of like surreal. And you know what's funny? So I mentioned that I was at a dinner on Thursday night, I think in my last video, where I felt this like major implantation twinge that like knocked me out of a conversation momentarily and reminded me of what was like hopefully going on. But what I didn't mention, which was kind of funny, was I when I arrived for the dinner and I was walking up to the house, I hear someone say, Vanessa. And I'm thinking, what? Like, aren't they in the house? So I like kind of looking around, and then hear again, Vanessa. And then I see a car stopped at the end of the driveway. I was like, huh? So I start walking to the car, and it's my doctor's admin. I was like, what are you doing here? Or I guess she's like, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, like I'm going for dinner. Because she thought, she's like, oh, you're going on a hot date? Because I was all dressed up. And, yeah, it was a really important dinner. Anyway, we were like joking that, well, maybe this was a sign of her seeing me that things were gonna go well. And I don't know that I believe in all that kind of stuff, but maybe. Maybe. Ugh, this is so great. I'm tearing up again. Ugh, so good. And so hopefully in a couple days, I'll get to find out if it's a boy or girl. I tried to find out during the FET, but the geneticist had left for the day because I think we did it around 6 or 5, something like that. And then my doctor said, well, wait for their pregnancy test. And I guess I was just feeling so discouraged earlier this week that I didn't think this was gonna happen. But I'm damn sure glad it did. Anyway, now it's the weekend, so I'm sure the geneticists have like a Monday through Friday job at the clinic. But yeah, hopefully I'll get to find out in the next few days. Such good news. Such good news. Okay, have a good day.